Thanks for coming again, guys. Pamela. um, Today, we're going to talk about setting limits. So this is usually, a hot topic or a topic that parents really like to talk about. They always want to know how to, set those boundaries at home. So really quick, just kind of going over last week's homework, and hopefully at the end we can kind of talk a little bit about how this went this week. So last week we talked about cooperation. We really talked about those cooperation charts. And the first step always being to connect first. So we talked about the different strategies of doing that, getting on your child's level, eye contact, making sure that you kind of acknowledge their emotion before you try to, get any type of cooperation. It's just going to make everything go smoother. Choosing those two behaviors that your child displays that you'd like to change. So starting small, really starting with things that they're able to achieve. So I'd love to hear about, kind of some things that you tried, and hopefully if you did do a cooperation chart, you started with something that your child was able to accomplish first. And then brainstorming ways that you can teach and show what you want. So teaching and showing them exactly what you want from them instead of assuming that they know. I think a lot of times as adults we do assume that the child knows what it is we want from them and exactly how we want it done. And oftentimes that's not the case. And then having them repeat that to you and show you that they do understand and acknowledging that they did it correctly. Creating that cooperation chart with those behaviors, and then the key to that is tracking you and your child's progress. So kind of the key is they're tracking your own progress. So am I teaching and showing? I really hope that you that really hit home last week of making sure that you outline those expectations and you teach and show them to your child, and keeping track and keeping yourself accountable for doing that. Creating choices and allowing choice. So you're really choosing what those choices are. Any of those choices are acceptable to you, but if you present them to your child and you allow them a little bit of autonomy in that situation, would you like to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt? Do you want to brush your teeth in the bathroom, or do you want to brush your teeth in mommy's room and I'll sit next to you? Whatever that choice is, as long as you're okay with both of them, allowing them that choice is probably going to get you some more compliance. So kind of moving forward to setting limits, I just want to really emphasize that consistency is key. So this kind of means a few different things. Consistency within your own limits. So if you are the sole caregiver or you're the primary caregiver for your child, whether that means you're with them most of the time or that maybe that means you're a single parent or whatever, you want to make sure that when you are choosing what those expectations are and teaching them, that you're kind of consistent across different contexts. Things are not really different on Monday as they are on Friday. It shouldn't really be dependent upon your mood, but you should really try to make it consistent across those days and times. So now this also can mean if you're co-parenting or if there's other people in your household who are often, providing boundaries for your kid, that is also important. Again, I remember last week or the week before when Camille was on the call, she kind of was talking about how that was a challenge. And it definitely can be a challenge of those other people in your house who have different ideas of maybe what the limits are. So I would say start there. If you know that is the biggest issue for you, start with that adult conversation about what do we want here. Let's say you're wanting, that there's huge tantrums around, getting ready for school in the morning, and everyone in the house is aware of it. Kind of sitting down with the adults first and saying, what do we want this time to look like? What do we want him or her to be doing? So deciding that first and making sure you're all on the same page so that you can all be consistent with the child, because it can get pretty confusing when, mom and dad say different things or enforce different things, or grandma or whoever it is. So it is common for parents to let misbehavior go when it doesn't bother them that much. For example, you're in a great mood, or maybe you're too busy to attend to it. If you let misbehavior go when you're calm and react to it primarily when you're upset or agitated or tired, then you're setting up an emotional reaction instead of a thoughtful and deliberate action. So this is actually directly from the lesson this week, one of the paragraphs it's in. But, I think this is a pretty powerful couple sentences here, because if you really maybe think back on the last few times that you've provided limits for your child, or had to, discipline them or reprimand them, just kind of thinking, was I coming from an emotional place? Did I get really angry about something random that I'm not normally bothered by? So if today it's okay for my child to play with my phone while we, I don't know, wait for our food to be ready, and then tomorrow it's not okay, because I'm agitated, I'm irritated, and I just need to use my phone right now. That's kind of goes back to that consistency and whether or not, you're providing that day to day. So you're reacting kind of emotionally in that situation. I'm tired today, I'm going to be irritated by this, and tomorrow I'm not, versus, kind of preparing for that and having some more deliberate thoughts about what are the boundaries that you want. So in those moments that that you have to enforce a boundary or discipline, if that is what you're doing, making sure that you're coming from a calm space. So, and then again, not coming from that emotional space of irritation. So what can help with that, obviously, is 3 deep breaths, kind of really focusing on that deep belly breathing, not breathing from your chest, but really breathing in. And really, I encourage you, if this is something that that is a struggle for you, you are triggered sometimes or maybe often by your child or by whining or, whatever it is that triggers you, I would say for this next coming week, simply focusing on this, baby steps here, focusing on calming yourself before you take action and enforce the boundary. And I really think that you'll see some differences in how your child responds to you, is whether or not you're coming from this place of kind of angry, irritated energy, or if you're calm, because when you're calm and in control, your child feels much more comfortable kind of relaxing themselves. Just kind of noticing, what are my trigger thoughts? It's another thing she talks about in the video if you do check it out later. So when you are irritated in this moment, just kind of noticing. Again, this could be your very first step of what you're doing. Just kind of noticing, what am I feeling? What am I thinking in this moment? And am I thinking, I can't believe she's talking to me like this? Or are you thinking, I can't stand her whining? Or, what are the thoughts that are kind of coming that are irritating you? And it's just kind of a way for us to recognize what are those things that trigger us, and that's really important information. And then kind of repeating to yourself, again, this is in the video, I'm safe, I'm calm, I can handle this. So if that doesn't feel comfortable for you, do whatever you need to do to calm yourself down. But just kind of reminding yourself that you're in the control position, you can handle this, and that you're calm. And again, if this is the only thing you can do this week, I still think that's awesome. This is really, really a powerful place to start. And you cannot expect your child to be calm and regulated if you're not calm and regulated. So one of the things she talks about in the video, which I think is funny, is, oftentimes we yell at kids to be quiet, which is, if you think about it, is really ironic. So I'm going to yell at you, be quiet. So I'm yelling, what are you modeling in that moment? You're yelling, your expectation is that your child's going to be quiet. So, kind of the way to think about that is like, how can I get this quiet behavior? Maybe I should, like the things that we talked about, approach my child, get on their level, have some eye contact, and speak calmly and softly and ask them to be quiet. Can you be quiet, please? That's much more likely to get you a quiet response than yelling at them. So beginning to set those limits when you're calm and thoughtful. So again, first step is calm yourself, kind of figuring out what is that for you, what do you need to do that, and then setting limits from that place, as opposed to this kind of, I think sometimes what happens with parents and teachers too, is kind of in the moment, spur of the moment limit setting. Like, I don't like this behavior, this is a rule. Starting now, this is a rule. So, kind of coming from this, again, proactive, preventative space of what are the rules that I want? What is it exactly that I expect during morning routine? What do I expect during bedtime routine? What do I expect during cleanup time? What do I expect during meal times? There's dozens and dozens of times throughout your day and your week with your kids where you expect different things from them, and instead of kind of reacting, fly by the seat of your pants. This is what I expect right now. Really thinking about what those things are intentionally. And if your child's old enough, set limits with them. So talk to them, ask them, how do we clean up toys? What are some ideas you have? Again, this isn't really applicable to maybe a child who's three or under, but a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, they can certainly articulate some ideas for you, and you might be shocked what they come up with. And then again, they're kind of giving you a hand in that process, and that can only build confidence and increase that connection with you. So those are just some ideas of the different areas that you can ask your child about what they would like the limits to be. And then just thinking about the times of day, the settings, people involved, focusing on preventing problem behavior rather than what do I do once it happens. Because really, we just want to, the ideal situation is that we're going to prevent it as much as possible, instead of what are the tips and tricks for when my child does meltdown. So kind of coming at it from that preventative attitude before the behavior shows up. So in this week's lesson, this is on page 25, helping your child practice feeling in control of his or her behavior. So again, by modeling your own control, your own self-control and regulation, you're helping your child to do the same thing. So trying strategies as reinforcement for cooperation, redirection, preparation for transitions. So again, if you know that's difficult for your child to transition from cleaning up, or it's time to eat breakfast now, or whatever, that you're kind of prepping them for that time. And then using timeout consistently when your child doesn't follow those limits. So in this lesson, they really they're emphasizing timeout as a way of disciplining, and that's totally fine. I think it's a great way. I think it's a great first step. If you aren't using it, or you're using some other type of discipline, I think you can I think the rules around what to do when disciplining your child are really similar, regardless of what sort of discipline that you're providing. So teaching them to stay within limits at home helps them develop self-control in other settings. So even though, it may seem like your child doesn't like rules and limits, it's actually not true. It makes them feel really safe to know what are the rules in this situation, what is expected of me. A lot of times when we think maybe permissive parents or permissive parenting, it kind of makes your child feel very dysregulated and confused. They don't really know what it is that you want and need from them. And from day to day, it can be different. So we're wanting to make sure that from day to day, there's a lot of consistency in their life and routine. So they just kind of go through some examples of, let's say your child grabs a toy from another child and hits him with the toy. You ask them to stop, your child continues to hit, you ask them to go to time out. The scenario happens several times, maybe trying another strategy. So finding a time, and we've talked about this in our communication and cooperation weeks, is finding a time when your child is doing the right thing and make sure you're noticing and acknowledging them for that. So providing that attention and connection in those times when your child is doing the right thing, in order to, again, prevent them needing to get that connection from a negative place. Being consistent, again, so that's the key here. If you don't take anything else away from this lesson, I really hope you take away this idea of consistency. So again, at times we as adults are irritable or in a bad mood, so that mood can make your reaction inconsistent. And that can be really scary for your child, is you yelling at them or being upset about something that's unusual, something that wasn't a problem yesterday or last week, that they don't know what the rules are. So last week's cooperation skill activities kind of laid a foundation for this setting limits. You and your child work together on following directions, not interrupting, and cooperating. So this week's activities kind of help your child meet those expectations, and you deciding what those expectations are. We'll go over the activity and parent tip cards in a little bit, and I'll show you some of the ones that I think are helpful. And then remembering the 3-to-1 rule for cooperation and self-control. So 3 praises or 3 acknowledgments, 3 times of noticing what your child's doing right for every 1 correction, reprimand, or discipline. So just kind of checking in with yourself and seeing, is that what I'm doing? Am I really providing that much attention and connection for what they're doing right? So then the do's and don'ts box. This is on page 28 of your lesson. So this is also similar to some of the ones that are listed in the cooperation week, which was last week. So making simple and specific requests, using a neutral tone of voice, that kind of ties into calming yourself before you're kind of providing discipline. So if you're calm, you're going to probably be in a neutral tone of voice. Kind of recognizing if yelling is a problem for you, like recognizing and asking yourself why that is. I posted another video in the community. I don't know if anyone got a chance to see it, but I think it's actually really powerful. I really like that video. It kind of talks about how emotions were handled when you were growing up, and just really thinking about what are the different ways that your parents responded to your emotion, and then also thinking about, is that kind of how I respond to my child? And is that how I want to respond? You know, maybe it is. Maybe your parents responded really well and that you want to do the same thing. And that's great. But maybe, you can make some different choices too. So do provide an immediate consequence if your child doesn't comply. So this is also important. So not only being consistent across situations, but really being proactive in providing that limit setting or that boundary as soon as it's crossed. So you want to make sure that whatever it is you're providing for discipline, that it happens right after the situation. So let's say your child's acting up in the grocery store. Is it terrible to wait until you're home to provide discipline? No, it's okay. It's fine. If that's what you end up doing, you're not going to damage them for life or anything. But it's more effective, let's say, to kind of provide it right after the incident, because then the child can connect the behavior to the limit setting. Noticing the behavior that you want. We've talked about that a lot. So that's definitely a great proactive way to get more of the behavior that you want. Minimizing attention for that inappropriate behavior, and then using timeout or a form of discipline when necessary. So you are creating a boundary. It's not all about just letting things go. You definitely want to make sure that your child knows what that expectation is. So don't wait until you're upset to back up your limits with discipline. Don't yell. Again, that's much easier said than done, but kind of recognizing if that's difficult for you. Don't threaten to use timeout, just use it. I think this is really important. So again, whether you're using timeout or something else, I think it goes along with the consistency of I hear a lot, teachers too, a lot of times, like at the count of 3, we're going to go to the blue chair, for example, if that's, how they're using timeout in school. And they count to 3 and nothing happens. Or they count to 3 and they've already moved on to something else. So making sure that you really follow through, because your child needs to know you're serious. They need to know that when you say something's going to happen, it's going to happen. Don't react emotionally or negatively. We talked about that. Commenting on everything your child does wrong. Obviously, that's not focusing on what you want. That's not focusing on the right things. And then drawing attention to behaviors you don't want. So that's kind of also going along with noticing when your child is following the expectations that you have. So setting limits takes effort. Sometimes it's easier to let that behavior go. But if you are inconsistent with discipline and inconsistent with following up with those rules, your child's definitely not going to know what they are and probably not going to be exhibiting a lot of positive behaviors. So it's more likely that misbehavior is going to become a habit. So using timeout. Again, if you're doing all these proactive things first, so I don't want you to immediately jump to this as like, this is going to fix it and this is going to make it work. Thinking about those preventative measures first and foremost. And if you know, and you can really say to yourself confidently, I know I'm noticing my child do the right thing. I know that I'm teaching and showing what I want from them. I know I'm being consistent with telling them what my expectations are. If you feel you're doing all of those things and you've really been consistently doing them, then I would say you can provide discipline if your child is still acting out. So I say that because that just means your child's going to act out less and less the more that those things are in place. So using the timeout, be careful here at the bottom paragraph here, be careful not to overuse it. If you're asking your child to go to timeout over and over again, it's probably not helping them learn new skills. So I think that means if you're having to do the timeout, or let's say you're already doing them at home, and it's just going on and you're still seeing the same behavior, I would start to maybe ask some questions about whether that's working for you. It sounds like maybe it's not. So what does that mean? Does that mean maybe my child doesn't know what my expectation is? Making sure, again, you're going back and teaching and showing what it is that you want. Maybe that means you're not being consistent about that. So the inconsistency is causing the behavior to continue because you may or may not follow through. So kind of just thinking in your mind and troubleshooting through those situations if you feel like some form of discipline, whatever you're using, doesn't seem to be working. And then these are just some quick guidelines for how to use timeouts on page 29 of your packet. So a timeout is about 3 to 5 minutes maximum, really, 5 minutes maximum, in a quiet place, a boring place, not a lot of things to grab and play with. And then selecting that place ahead of time. And again, this idea of teaching and showing. So making sure that you're teaching and showing what you want in timeout. Again, this assumption that, well, they know what that means. They know that means they have to sit quietly in this corner and not touch things, That's not true, especially for a 3-year-old. You would really need to teach and show what it is that you want in timeout. So show them how to sit on the chair. Show them that you want their hands in their lap. Whatever it is that you want from them. So that number 3 there, in words your child can understand, explain the timeout procedure and why it is used. And then number 4, show your child where it will occur. Practice it before you use it. It maybe sounds crazy, but really that will help them to comply with the actual timeout procedures. Make sure that they know what it is that you want. When you have to use it, so kind of follow these guidelines or steps. So remaining calm and using a neutral tone of voice. Again, that requires you to breathe first and calm yourself down. Tell your child the specific behavior that earned the timeout. So you didn't stop fighting with your friend when I asked you to. You didn't put the toys away when I asked you to. You didn't put your shoes on before we got out of the house and I had to put them on for you. Whatever it is that you were reminding them to do. That's so that you can make sure they know exactly why they're there and you don't assume that they know. Setting your timer for however amount of time you want to have them sit there. Again, maximum 5 minutes. Not talking to them during that time. So really trying to give that, allowing that a time for them to kind of think. I would also recommend that you do kind of talk a little bit about feelings before you put them in the timeout. Letting them know, I notice that you're really upset about this, and kind of at least acknowledging that so they feel that they are heard in that capacity. And then this one, when timeout is over, it's over. Apologies aren't necessary. So Pamela, you had asked about this. I really do think that the intention there is really from the adult's perspective. So making sure that we're not holding a grudge against the child. Sometimes I see this happening in a classroom if the child's really been acting out several times. Sometimes the adult is just natural. We're irritated. And so when the timeout is over, we're kind of still, we're still focusing on that child. We're still, every little thing that they may be doing, quote unquote, wrong, we're kind of jumping on it right away, so you're just already irritated and agitated. So I think this is more the idea of you as the adult dropping it, really, really dropping that grudge and saying, okay, clean slate. That was the price they paid for what they did, and now I'm going to move on. I'm not going to hold on to that. And then use the timeout, don't just threaten to use it. Okay, so this clip I do want to watch. This is about 6 minutes. So this talks about handling temper tantrums. So when we have all those things in place, the rules, we've taught the rules, we're confident that our child knows what we want from them, you're still going to get difficult behaviors. They're never going to be gone. And remembering that fact from last week or the week before, your child complies approximately 60% of the time. That's normal. So you're going to get non-compliance. So sometimes that non-compliance is going to turn into a tantrum. And I just thought that this video is a really great way to kind of talk about what to do in that situation. So when you do have, big emotions happening, that you kind of feel a little bit more prepared, maybe some things you can try. So this is again from Conscious Discipline. I encourage you to Google that, and they have a lot of other videos you'll see on the right side that I think are helpful. So.
Welcome to Conscious Clips and Our Time Together. Today we're going to talk about temper tantrums. Now there's a number of reasons children have temper tantrums. First, they're very developmentally normal from children up to 3 years of age. And young children at that time, they're going to have a temper tantrum from an urgent need that's not met, or when they're tired, hungry, bored, or frustrated. Older children over the age of 3 have temper tantrums for different reasons. Generally, they have them because they've been given into, they've had a tantrum earlier in their life and it's worked for them, so they continued that skill as a strategy of getting their way. They have them for unrealistic expectations of parents, inappropriate discipline that's a little bit too punitive or too permissive, and also when they are fatigued, they will do that. And the last one is when they've had too much stress in their life. Those of you who had children, maybe one or more children, you might say, well, how come one child has more temper tantrums than another? Well, this is based on a number of things. First, it's based on the temperament of the child. Some kids are just born easy temperament. They're easy to regulate. They go to sleep well. They eat well. They're just very easy children. Other children are born with very difficult temperaments. It's hard to soothe them. They're finicky eaters. They're finicky sleepers. When they get upset, they can't calm as easily as other children. And the last one, again, is stressors, inconsistent routines, inappropriate discipline, unrealistic expectations, divorce, child care, death in the family, depression. All these things will affect the amount, number, and intensity of tantrums that children will have. So how best can we respond to temper tantrums? The first thing I want you to hear, and I want you to hear it very, very clearly, is there's no right way to do it. Different things will be appropriate for different children. But in general, these are some strategies that will be helpful. The first thing to understand is temper tantrums are a nonverbal communication. We all recognize them. The face is red, they're wailing, their arms are going, they're holding their breath, they're screaming. We recognize a temper tantrum. So what are they trying to say? Generally, they're going to say, I'm overwhelmed, I can't handle this. The second one is, I'm trying a strategy that worked last time, and I'm wondering if it's going to work this time because you gave in last time, so all I got to do is scream and shout long enough, hard enough, and ultimately I'm going to get what I want. So one, it's developmental, I'm overwhelmed, and two, you've taught the child to have these tantrums. So we respond to these almost in similar ways. The first thing to do is to unhook ourselves. So again, we're going to be a star. We're not going to get triggered. We're going to take a deep breath, and we're going to calm ourselves. Sometimes just calming ourselves puts some calming energy around the child. The second thing we're going to do is that we're going to offer empathy, and we're going to start with their body. Your arms are going like this. Your face is like this. Your body's telling me, I feel so frustrated. So I'm going to say those words again so you can get them. Your arms are going like this. Your face is all scrunched up. Your body is telling me, I really wanted to watch this, or I am so tired. Whatever your best guess is. And from that situation, then, you're going to actually just leave the child alone, if that seems what would be best for them, or you're going to pick the child up, put them to your body, and say nothing but breathe at first. And you're going to say, you're safe. You can handle this. I've got you. You're safe. You can handle this. I've got you. Once the temper tantrum is over, whatever the original trigger was, the child does not get out of anything. If they threw a fit about taking their fork to the sink, once the temper tantrum is over, give them a choice. You can carry the fork over in this hand, or you can carry the fork in this hand to the sink, which is best with you. If it was about wearing blue pants as opposed to green pants, Once it's over, they're going to put the green pants on. Just give them a choice. Do you want to put them on when sitting on the floor, or would it be easier to stand up and put your pants on? The temper tantrum does not allow a child to get out of doing something. So why not just let the child flump around on the floor like a fish out of water and ignore, quote, the bad behavior? We want to offer empathy, we want to offer breathing, because it's going to help the child learn how to get from the lower centers of their brain to the higher centers of their brain, and we're providing that methodology that and internalize it in the child that they can use the rest of their life. So here's your homework. When you see a child in a grocery store and it's not even yours, here's what you can practice. Just breathe and wish that child well and that family. Put some calmness into the energy as opposed to, what the heck are they doing? Add your calmness to the situation. If it's your own child, unhook. Do not take it personally. Take some breath. Add some calmness to the chaos with your own energetic being. Say to the child, oh, your hands, your feet are going like this. Your face looks like this. Your body's telling me. I'm just so tired and so hungry. And then, depending on the temperament of the child, we're either going to leave them alone, give them some space, or you're going to scoop them up and put them on your chest, relax, and say, you're safe. You're safe. I've got you. You can handle this. And then once the temper tantrum is over, they're going to go back and complete the task that triggered them to begin with. Until next time, I wish you well.
Okay, so she talked a little bit about the STAR procedure in there. So stopping, checking in with ourselves, taking those deep breaths, calming yourself, not taking it personally. Again, that's much easier said than done. You know, it's very easy to be triggered by that. Recognizing the emotion, offering empathy, you know, leaving the child alone if you feel that that's something that would help them, or, you know, physically helping them and kind of holding them and calming them down. So this is kind of in a situation where obviously their emotions have escalated and elevated, and you're just trying to bring them down and calm them down. Letting them know they're safe, they can handle this. And then once the tantrum is over, this is like every other limit that you're setting. So this is another great example of setting that limit. You must follow through with whatever it was that you requested. Following through with the behavior that was triggered. So she gave some great examples there. You know, kids have temper tantrums over lots of different things. You know, I wanted the block that she had. They grab the block from their sibling, you know, making sure that they give the block back. Because once they're in that calm state of mind, they're able to make a choice. When they're freaking out and flapping on the ground and screaming, and you're just telling them you need to give the block back to your sister, you need to give the block back to your sister, they're not going to process anything in that moment at all. You know, they have to be emotionally regulated to make a choice. So just by, you know, enforcing them or telling them, you know, literally forcing them to give the block back, you're probably just going to escalate the behavior. So just some themes from the last couple of weeks, just kind of keeping in mind and thinking these things through, and maybe, you know, Googling a little bit of more information about them if you have some time or you're wanting to. So regulating, calming yourself first and foremost before you're asking for cooperation from your child, before you're, you know, setting that limit. And that can be short-term and long-term. So short-term, taking those deep breaths and really calming down. And long-term, you know, that's kind of a bigger question, I think. Deciding what are some things in your life that help you to be calm. Do you need some more time to work out? Do you need to talk to your spouse about taking some me time for an hour every other day or something? You know what maybe can help you be more centered in asking for that. Teaching and showing your child those expectations, so using more than words. I really encourage you to role play, watch videos, walk through things with them, noticing what they're doing right, providing acknowledgement for that, and then feeling connected and doing those things to connect better with your child. And you know, even as adults, we want to comply. We definitely comply better with those we feel close to and loved by than someone who, you know, we don't feel very connected with. So it works the same with our kids. So real quickly, just some parent tip and activity cards. This is just reminding you to use a neutral tone. This is a parent tip card. Using that neutral tone is a good model. It helps them to stay calm, helps them to use that neutral tone too, instead of getting escalated. Practicing some activities that require them to have some limits. So green light go, red light stop, that's a great one. They're kind of learning when to go, when to stop, following those directions. Following the rules. So together creating rules for routine activities in your house. We talked about this earlier. Telling me the rules, what are the rules for washing hands, what are the rules for brushing teeth, and then making pictures, taking pictures, and showing them the different steps of the activity. I think visuals are really helpful, especially for young kids. This is kind of like that card game War, where you're just kind of putting down cards, and then whoever gets the highest card gets to take the deck. That's just another way, again, teaching them to take turns, teaching them to kind of start and stop a game. Freezing, so this is pretty self-explanatory. Maybe you've seen this at preschool, you already do this with your kids, but asking them to freeze and stop what they're doing. It's kind of a fun way to enforce some expectations. Encouraging them to have calming rituals for themselves. So thinking of a picture you can have in your mind. Imagine you're a bubble. Imagine you're a cloud. Imagine that you're petting your favorite kitty that we have at home. Whatever you think might calm your child, just, putting that kind of idea into their mind, something that they can focus on when they're really agitated. And then again, being honest. So telling your child about a time when you're upset and what you did to calm down. Or in those moments when you are upset and you're in front of your child, explaining what you're doing to calm down. Telling them, I need to take some deep breaths and calm down. I want to speak in a calmer voice to you. Those are all great things to say. Maybe it seems awkward, but that's just great. You're modeling for your child how to calm yourself. And that's really what you're asking them to do. So for homework next week, connecting first. I'm going to say this every week, and hopefully it comes to mind when you're thinking about these things. Creating expectations and guidelines for any and everything you anticipate could be a problem. So I really want you to feel empowered and feel like you have some choice in this matter. Like those difficult times, like what are the expectations that I have? How can I teach them? I want you to feel like there's an action, there's something you can do to help that behavior instead of just feeling, helpless about it and feeling like, well, what do I do? First decide what it is, what do I want? What do I want to see? And then teaching that. Teaching and showing them, again, having them repeat it to you, acknowledging that. When consequence is needed, providing it immediately. Checking whether it's appropriate. Again, a 20-minute timeout is not appropriate for a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old. And really kind of talking that over and deciding what you think is a good way of discipline for you. And then consistency, consistently following through. If you say you're going to do it, please do it.